Security is a more in-depth, cyclical, programmatic type of thing. It's not a project. It's never going to end, and we should always be, stressing that to every person we're talking to about security.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The CyberSecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The CyberSecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Lee Parrish, Chief Information Security Officer at Hertz.
What attracted you to the information security field?
I think for me it was the diversity of the work. So any given day you could be working on multiple different initiatives, and they differ from day to day. You could be working on policy one day, response the next day. You could be working on security operations types of activities another day. So I like the diversity of the work itself.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of variety in this field. And I think for anybody entering into this field, they could focus on different areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you wrote a piece for the CISO Compass called "The Colonoscopy of Cybersecurity," and I tell you that just really, as somebody who's had a few of those, I just think that's a very interesting analogy. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I was right at a time when I was starting as a CISO for a financial services firm. Started with the company, was doing the onboarding types of activities. Benefits was one of them. And one of the baseline benefits that you were given was life insurance. And you had an option to get more life insurance if you would like it. Well, I wanted more life insurance. I wanted to provide for my family in a way that my wife would not have to worry about that if something should happen to me. So I opted for the higher level of insurance. And when I did that, it set off two different processes. One was a written application, which I did, and I submitted that. No problem, came back and said, okay, you've passed the first stage. The second stage is a medical screening, and somebody will come to your office and do a medical screening, which happened. And that person did my height, my weight, asked me several questions about lifestyle, my smoker, non-smoker, things like that, exercise, and then did a urinalysis testing, and then put all of those results into a report, submitted the report to his company, and after about 2 weeks came back and said for the level of insurance I was requesting, that I was insured at that level because of my health. And so it got me thinking at the time, well, that was not too bad. I thought it would be much more, intrusive, to have that. So I started thinking about it, and my undergraduate degree many years ago in college was in philosophy with a specialty in ethics. And so I've always found that applied ethics is really good. When you apply the fundamental ideas of ethics to specific things like medical ethics or communicative ethics, things like that, I found that it's much more productive to do that. So I looked at how this could be applied to information security. And so I looked at my regular healthcare provider. Every year I do a test, and then we do tests like urinalysis, blood work, cardiogram, EKGs, colonoscopies, which is where the title came from, blood work, as I mentioned, all these tests. And then at the end of those tests, it comes back and says, well, you're in good health. And so I got to thinking, well, how is that different from the life insurance screening that I went through? And I kind of applied it to compliance is equated to the health insurance medical screening, and security is the regular, the regular healthcare screening that you go through every year. And I made some differences there, and that's kind of where it came from. And it got a lot of good feedback. I first posted it on social media, then since took it down when I provided it for this great book. So.
Sure. Well, thank you. So what are some of those differences that you would say between those two?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think there's a certain causality that comes from the differences between compliance and security. So, for instance, with compliance, and I should preface this entire conversation by saying that I'm a firm believer in compliance, and that it's something that we all should.
So we shouldn't throw out the framework.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. We should all strive for that. I think that we should not stop there. I think that we should continue on and do more in the areas of cybersecurity. So the causation would be, like, for anybody who's trying to get, let's say, security budget in their program. A security executive will go to leadership, they'll request funding, and typically if you say something to the effect of, well, this is an audit issue, it seems like it goes a little bit smoother in the approval process. And I was thinking about that. I think the reason why is because there's a definitive point in time when you've actually addressed a specific need. And so, for instance, we have to be PCI compliant. Therefore, we need, I'm throwing things out there, two-factor authentication for our products. So we install the two-factor authentication, and we become PCI compliant. There's a start, a middle, and a finish to that. When it comes to cybersecurity budget, that's not related, so much to compliance or an audit issue or something like that. It's kind of ongoing. There's no end state where you check a box and say, okay, this has actually met the requirements, so we are PCI compliant. It's not like a project. It's not something that you funded it, therefore you're going to get this out of it. So you have to do a lot of work on risk mitigation, all of the risk management types of activities that so many of us work on to help to prove the value of security investments.
Have you found some of those audits in the past are more heavily focused on compliance areas, or do they get down into the security controls?
I think they're getting better. I really do. I think initially, people would ask certain questions, external providers would ask certain questions, or maybe you would do it yourself in a self-assessment situation. But I do think that they're getting more robust, and I think that they're getting better. A good example of that is not really related to compliance, but is cyber insurance. I remember many years ago getting a cyber insurance for the company that I was working for at the time, and it literally was a one-page piece of paper, and it said, okay, this is the application for cyber insurance. And I worked with general counsel, we signed it, and that was it. Fast forward 6, 7, 8 years later, and I find myself in a room with 30 people and 50 people on the phone, and they're all underwriters, and they're firing questions about you. What kind of perimeter security do you use? What kind, and it's all kind. I think it's evolved over time.
So they've seen the risk
exactly
of what those payouts could be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of those controls that we should be probably more focused on to actually have really good security versus really good compliance program?
I think there's a lot that goes into that question, but for me, the baseline that I always look for is good detection and good response capabilities. So the ability to detect any kind of issue is paramount. It's table stakes. I mean, you have to be able to do that. And to do that, you have to have good asset management. You need to know your environment and what's in your environment. So those two things working together will help to drive a good security program to start off with. But I've always told executives, though, one thing you have to one thing you have to anticipate is that when you ask for more detection and you are given more detection, guess what's going to happen? You're going to detect things, and when you detect things, there's going to be more things that you need to address. So that's kind of the catalyst for the security strategies that I've done in the past, is looking at the ability to detect, and then also on the other side of the coin is the ability to respond. And if you're in a small organization, you may need to seek help from a third-party provider to be able to do a retainer or something like that to help do response. I would advocate for an executed official retainer with a company where you've actually paid money to do that for reasons of, things go sideways really quickly. You have that pre-negotiated rate, you have the pre-negotiated SLAs, you know what to expect. So those two things in combination are real important for a program.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, available at Amazon.com and other booksellers.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because you're just going to drive up the staff. We know that staff is very hard to find enough staff today, or even if we could find enough staff, are they going to catch everything?
Right.
So is there more we should be doing in automation around all of these security controls?
Yeah, a fun thing that I've done in my career is I went back in the early 2000s. I went back and got an MBA degree. And I remember at the time, a lot of my friends were asking me at the time, hey, are you getting out of security? Why are you going back for an MBA? And I said, no, I'm doing it so I can do security better. And so one of the first things I look at is the finance aspects of cybersecurity. And it's no different when it comes to security labor, your team, third-party providers, things like that. You also have to look at it from a finance perspective. So if you work for a company and you figured out that you can have a fully burdened hourly rate for your internal team of $70 to $90 an hour. Then you look at the security capabilities that you want to bring in-house. And then you look at things like, monitoring and alerting. Obviously there's MSSPs, managed security services providers that are out there who can provide that leveraging economies of scale that I'll never be able to meet as a CISO. So their price is always going to be better in that area. So I'm going to outsource that quite a bit. And then I'm going to leverage my team for things that are a little bit more structured and a little bit more difficult to do. And then when it comes to forensic capabilities, if you look out into the market today, February of 2020, the rates anywhere average from $400 an hour up to $500, $600 an hour for forensic capabilities. Well, if I can do it for $75 an hour, I'd rather build that capability myself. Plus, that's what the security staff wants to do. That's the type of work that they want to do. So I'm going to build that capability.
Keep it fun and interesting for them and something they want to learn. So using that high value work for your teams. Right. But what about the governance, risk, and compliance? Keeping all these frameworks and everything. Do you see companies, should we be doing that inside or outside?
I think it's a combination. I think there should be a core capability within a team or within a company to do all of the GRC types of activities. And someone to be able to keep track of it and facilitate all of that work is a full-time job. And so at larger organizations I've worked for, we've had teams of 2, 3, 5 people doing GRC types of activities. Other companies, it's one person doing it. There is a clear, distinct line if the information security organization does not have a compliance piece to their team, if that's done external to the cybersecurity team. There should be clear, racy types of activities. Okay, you're going to be responsible for this, and we're going to be responsible for that. That's important too. But yeah, the GRC types of activities should be facilitated by a lot of the security teams.
And all these laws and regulations, the GDPR and the California Privacy Act. How do you keep up with all that? You built this framework, and now you have all those laws in there. So, what would you suggest for organizations to help with that?
I think a lot of it is just keeping up with what's going on in the industries that we're working in. So in other industries, I've worked in aerospace and defense. I've worked in the IRS was a big one that I was following for a while. Financial services, manufacturing, all of them have different industries, and you can kind of keep a pulse on what's going on from a cybersecurity perspective. And there's steering committees and working groups that I've attended. A lot of the law firms that we've worked with, outside counsels, have really good insight into what's happening from a legal perspective and a regulatory perspective. And so just keeping in touch with those folks and understanding that. I mean, at the end of the day, the days of the government staying out of our, out of our information technology infrastructures and corporations, those days are gone. I mean, there's always going to be more regulations. We're going to see more of them. And we just need to be ready to, as an industry, talk about those and help shape them.
I worked at one organization. We had one person that was their job, but their main job was, and the person was a lawyer, just to map all the regulations, and every time a new regulation would come out to do that determination.
Right.
Do we have the right controls in place? Very interesting. So in terms of the compliance and regulations, and what else would you share that as to how somebody could be more effective in managing all that and making sure that security is really being at the forefront and not just checking the boxes?
I think a lot of it, like with anything, is just building relationships with different parts of your company and explaining what's going on from a cybersecurity perspective and how it relates to compliance. Asset management, I talked about that earlier. That's an important piece. And so not having that, there should be discussions well in advance of any kind of regulatory audits or anything like that we need to ramp up in this area. Or if it's another area that that the company is in need of enhancing, we should be having those conversations at every level. Working very closely with internal audit is real important too. I found that building those relationships with external providers, the executive team at your company, internal audit, if you have a compliance organization, with your chief compliance officer, all of those relationships can't be understated. That's an important aspect of keeping a track of all of the things that are going on and being able to effectively address those in a timely.
Some people don't, it's the old adage, nobody gets excited when internal audit is saying, I want to have a meeting.
Right.
But they can actually be a really good ally to help get funding. Have you used that approach?
I have, yeah. That's a good way to do it. And again, that goes back to what I was mentioning before. It helps because the audit, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to each audit, and then another audit starts. So to be able to have that that final checkbox to say, okay, we've implemented these controls, therefore we are now compliant with XYZ regulation. That helps to get funding. But also it helps with the relationship to be able to understand what's on the horizon and help to actually shape a lot of the audits and say, hey, look, maybe you should take a look at auditing this area over here. I think I know there's some issues over there. And I'm not having a lot of luck with moving the needle a little bit on that. So maybe you should take a look at that. Just kind of open type of dialogue and relationship with internal.
Any other tips to share that we, to help us not have to have an annual colonoscopy security just to be secure?
That's right. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we always have to have that annual colonoscopy. Actually, it's not annual anymore. It'd be 5 years. But I think it's just keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on from a regulatory perspective, and just. As a CISO, as a security executive, anybody in the security field, just always be providing that moment in time awareness to whoever you're talking to, that compliance does not equate to good security. You know, there's an old adage. You look at all of the companies that have been breached in recent years all have passed audits and have policies and have security folks on their teams. So there's a difference between checking a box and compliance, which again is very, very important, but it's different from security. Security is a more in-depth, cyclical, programmatic type of thing. It's not a project. It's never going to end, and we should always be, stressing that to every person we're talking to about security.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, Lee. This is very informative, and I really appreciate you taking the time and all of your contributions to security.
Oh, not at all. My pleasure, and congratulations on the book. It's a great read.
CyberReason is the champion for today's defenders, providing an endpoint security platform to prevent, detect, and respond to malicious operations on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. CyberReason. End cyber attacks from endpoints to the enterprise to everywhere. Learn more at cyberreason.com/CISO stories.